All right, so are you ready to dive into some pretty thought-provoking art?
Always up for a challenge.
Excellent. Today we're looking at Malka Germania.
Oh, interesting.
It's an art film installation by Israeli artist Yael Bartana.
Okay.
And I know art film, you're thinking, right? But trust me,
Yeah,
this one is anything but typical.
I'm intrigued.
Well, we've got this fascinating academic paper that really digs into all the layers,
Yeah.
the symbolism, the meaning.
Hmm.
And our mission today is to help you decode it all,
That's good.
especially this single androgynous figure
Okay.
at the center of it all, Malka Germania.
Right.
We're talking about some really big ideas here.
Yeah.
History, identity, even how we as a society deal with responsibility.
Wow. So right off the bat,
Yeah.
we're not dealing with a real person, are we? Malka Germania is a character created by Bartana for this film.
That's exactly right.
Interesting.
So we've got this fictional character
Yeah.
dropped right into a very real and
Yep.
complex world.
That's-
And honestly, that name,
Right.
Malka Germania, that's a fantastic place to start unpacking all of this.
Absolutely. And just the name itself,
Yeah.
Malka Germania translates to Queen Germany in Hebrew.
Ooh.
Yeah. So think about that for a second.
Yeah.
It's got this feminine title, Queen,
Right.
but it's right up against the weight of the word Germany,
Oh, yeah.
especially given its history.
Absolutely. And then there's how Malka looks.
Right.
This simple cream-colored robe, it gives her a very distinct, almost messianic
Oh, yeah.
feel.
Yeah, that visual choice is
Yeah.
so deliberate.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that robe?
Yeah.
It evokes figures like Jesus, but here's where that tension comes back into play.
Okay.
Malka is both queen and this potential savior figure,
Right.
blurring the lines between typically masculine and feminine imagery.
I see.
And Bartana's placing this androgynous figure
Yeah.
right in the heart of modern-day Berlin,
Wow.
a city still wrestling with its history.
It's almost like she's forcing us to confront all these contradictions at the same time.
Exactly.
So let's talk about those messianic vibes.
Okay.
The film opens with a really powerful image.
Okay.
Malka walking alone on a railway track.
And the way Bartana films this is key.
Okay.
We see Malka in silhouette light streaming through her figure,
Yeah.
and then these separate clips of people watching her.
Oh, wow.
Their gazes are just fixed on her.
It's powerful.
It is. It immediately calls to mind those classic depictions of Jesus,
Yeah.
but then it makes you ask,
What's that?
what kind of savior is Malka meant to be?
Right. And if she's meant to be some kind of savior, what does that say about our need or even our desire for someone to come in and just fix things?
Exactly. If we're looking to this androgynous figure for salvation, what does that say about how we view traditional gender roles, especially when it comes to leadership? This is where the film starts to really poke at those assumptions.
Speaking of challenging assumptions, we can't ignore the fact that Malka's gender is intentionally ambiguous. It's not about portraying a specific identity,
Right.
but about starting a much bigger conversation.
The source material actually poses some very direct questions about this. What responsibility does society have towards the individual, and vice versa? How does outsourcing one's responsibility to an image savior function and play through? These aren't easy questions.
It's like the film is holding up a mirror and asking, are we willing to take responsibility for ourselves and each other, or are we hoping someone else will just come along and do the heavy lifting for us?
And that question becomes even more complex when you consider the backdrop of the film. Berlin, a city haunted by its history, specifically the Holocaust.
Throughout the film, we see Malka encountering these very real historical monuments and buildings. It's impossible to ignore the weight of the past in those scenes. It's like she's a ghost from another time walking among us.
And that's precisely what Bartana wants us to feel. It's a visual reminder that history isn't something neatly contained in textbooks or museums. It's embedded in the places we live and the choices we make.
So we've got this character, Malka Germania, who embodies this fascinating blend of messianic imagery and gender ambiguity set against the backdrop of Berlin's complex history. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's time we unpack those questions of responsibility a bit more. The source material dives into some really interesting ideas about individual versus collective action.
Let's do it. I'm already feeling like I need to take some notes. So we've established that Malka Germania brings up a lot of questions about responsibility, right? Both
Yeah.
on an individual and a societal level.
Yeah, definitely.
So how does the film actually explore that tension?
Well, it's interesting because it doesn't give us easy answers, you know?
Yeah.
There's no clear-cut villain or a simple solution.
Okay.
Instead, Bartana uses Malka's journey to make us think about the choices we make in the face of difficult histories.
So it's not just about the Holocaust. It's about how we respond to injustice and suffering.
Exactly. Think about it. We all encounter situations where we have to decide whether to speak up or step in or even just acknowledge the suffering of others. Malka's presence, particularly in a city like Berlin, forces us to confront that choice.
That's such a powerful connection. It's like the film is saying, okay, you're witnessing this. What are you going to do about it?
And that question of what we do is where the idea of collective responsibility comes in. The source material describes Malka as a symbol of that, of shared burdens and the potential for healing.
But what does that actually look like in practice? It's a pretty abstract concept.
It is, but think about it in terms of something like climate change. No single person can solve that problem, right? It takes collective action, a recognition that we all contribute to the issue, and therefore we share the responsibility for finding solutions.
Okay, I see the connection. So in the context of Malka Germania, this collective responsibility could be about acknowledging the weight of history and working together to create a more just and equitable future.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we're not isolated individuals. We're part of a larger social fabric. And our actions or inactions have consequences that ripple outward.
I'm also curious about how Malka's androgynous appearance plays into this idea of responsibility.
That's where things get really interesting. You see, Malka challenges those traditional notions of leadership and power. She's not a stereotypical strongman figure or a damsel in distress. Her ambiguity forces us to rethink who we typically look to for guidance or for salvation.
So it's not just about what we do, but who we look to for leadership and inspiration.
Right, and by presenting Malka in this way, Bartana might be suggesting that true leadership, the kind that can actually bring about lasting change, doesn't necessarily conform to those traditional binary gender roles.
Okay, so we've talked about responsibility, but there's another big theme here we need to unpack: redemption. Even though there's all this messianic imagery, it doesn't feel like the film is offering a traditional religious message of salvation.
Absolutely. It's more about seeking a different kind of redemption, a collective healing from past traumas. The source material talks about Malka embodying the, color white symbolism of purity, hope, and a blank slate.
So it's not about erasing the past, but about finding a way to move forward with hope and a commitment to building something better.
Exactly. And this ties back into the idea of collective responsibility. Redemption isn't something that's just handed to us. It's something we have to actively work towards together.
Makes me think about those scenes where Malka encounters everyday people in Berlin. She's not preaching or performing miracles. She's just present in these spaces.
That's such a keen observation. And it reinforces the idea that redemption isn't about grand gestures or supernatural intervention. It's about those small, everyday acts of connection and understanding.
It's about acknowledging the shared humanity that connects us even in the face of difference or past conflict.
And it's about recognizing that healing and growth can emerge even for the darkest chapters of history.
This is all so much to unpack. I can't help but wonder, if I were to encounter Malka Germania on the streets of Berlin, how would I react? What would it make me think about that?
That's the brilliant thing about art like this. It sparks those very personal reflections. There's no single right way to interpret or respond to Malka Germania. It's about what it triggers within each of us.
It's like Bartana is holding up this mirror not just to society as a whole, but to each individual viewer, asking us to confront our own assumptions and biases.
And that's where true change begins, with that internal reflection and a willingness to challenge our own perspectives.
We've been talking a lot about symbolism and abstract concepts, but I'm curious about the film's visual language. What are some of the techniques Bartana uses to convey these complex ideas? I'm really fascinated by how Bartana uses just the visuals of film to make these points. It's not just about what's being said, but also how it's shown.
Well, absolutely. Bartana is a master of visual storytelling. Like, for example,
Yeah.
remember those scenes where Malka's walking alone on those railway tracks?
Yeah.
Those weren't just random locations, railway tracks.
Right.
They're often seen as these symbols of journeys, transitions, even destinations.
So it's like Malka's journey through Berlin is like a metaphor for our own journeys of understanding and growth.
Exactly. And the way Bartana uses light and shadow in those scenes,
Yeah.
it really emphasizes that symbolism. Malka is often shown in silhouette, with light kind of streaming through her figure.
Uh-huh.
It creates this really ethereal, almost otherworldly effect.
It's like she's both present and absent at the same time, like a ghost from the past haunting the present.
And then there's the way Bartana cuts between those scenes of Malka and the reactions of the people around her.
Right.
We see them watching her sometimes with curiosity, sometimes with fear, sometimes with a mix of both.
It's like their reactions are mirroring our own internal struggle to understand and make sense of this figure who embodies so much complexity.
Exactly. And remember how we talked about Malka's robe and the color white?
Oh, yeah.
Another powerful visual element that Bartana uses throughout the film. White can symbolize so many things. Purity and innocence, hope, a blank slate.
It's like Malka's this blank canvas onto which we can project our own hopes and anxieties about the future.
Exactly. And by presenting Malka in this way, Bartana is inviting us to think about the possibility of redemption and reconciliation even in the face of unimaginable trauma.
So it's not just about dwelling on the darkness of the past, but about looking for those glimmers of hope and possibility for a better future.
Precisely. And the fact that Bartana chose to set this film in modern-day Berlin,
Right.
it further amplifies that message. You know, Berlin's a city that has witnessed so much darkness and division,
Yeah.
but it's also a city that has undergone incredible transformation and renewal.
It's like Berlin itself becomes this symbol of the possibility of healing and growth.
And by placing Malka in this context, Bartana is suggesting that this kind of healing and growth isn't just some abstract ideal, it's something that can happen right here, right now, in the real world.
This has been such an incredible deep dive into Malka Germania. It's made me realize that art can be so much more than just something beautiful to look at. It can be a catalyst for reflection, for dialogue, and even for social change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes Malka Germania such a powerful and timely work of art.
Yeah.
It speaks to some of the most pressing issues of our time. Identity, history,
Mhm.
responsibility, and the search for healing and reconciliation.
So for our listeners, if you're looking for an art experience that will challenge your assumptions, spark your imagination, and leave you with more questions than answers, then I highly recommend seeking out Malka Germania. You can find images and even clips from the film online, but if you ever have the opportunity to experience the installation in person,
Yeah,
don't hesitate.
it's an experience you won't soon forget. And as you encounter Malka Germania, ask yourself those questions we've been grappling with today. What is my responsibility to the past? What does redemption look like in a world still grappling with injustice? And most importantly, what kind of future do I want to help create? Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.